After a month of not seeing John, he abruptly handed me a divorce lawyer's business card, neglecting to inquire about my well-being or feelings regarding the impending divorce from his unemployed wife. "Pay me $1,000 a month as alimony. Sounds good, take care," he quipped, standing beside Emily, who wore a similarly smug expression, her arm wrapped around his. "Fine, let's divorce then," I replied nonchalantly, surprising John, though he quickly shared a knowing smile with Emily. John's lack of depth made executing my revenge plan on them easier after the divorce papers were approved. "My name is Sarah Wolfe, a 47-year-old illustrator and children's book author with a deep love for drawing. John and Emily are my childhood friends, with John also being my husband. It all began when John, whom I secretly harbored feelings for, asked me out as I headed to a different college after high school. Despite my surprise, I couldn't resist his confession, even after consulting with Emily, whose behavior had been troublesome since our teenage years. Though she had a tendency to steal other people's boyfriends, causing recurring issues, she remained a dear friend to both John and me. John and I tied the knot at 25, and 4 years later, Emily introduced her fiancé, George, a professional at a top-tier company, into our lives. "Nice to meet you, Sarah and John. I've heard so much about you, looking forward to our future together." He greeted us warmly. George was exceedingly polite, and our rapport was immediate. We bonded during holidays and vacations, enjoying trips and long train rides with drinks. However, cracks began to appear after Emily became pregnant 2 years into her marriage. John and I had never felt pressured to have children due to our large families, and we cherished our freedom to travel and indulge in drinks. While we admired families with children, we had never felt the urge to start our own. When Emily announced her pregnancy, John's demeanor shifted. He quit smoking at her behest and even offered to accompany her to doctor's appointments, using his vacation days. I cautioned him that George might feel uncomfortable, but John dismissed my concerns, accusing me of being heartless for not supporting our childhood friend in her time of need. Our arguments escalated after Emily gave birth, with John spending even more time with her and their child, Emma. When Emma turned 6, tensions reached a boiling point. The night before her graduation, John inexplicably began rummaging through the closet, tossing suits onto the bed. "What are you doing? You have a meeting tomorrow," I reminded him, and John hesitated before claiming he was simply choosing an outfit for the graduation ceremony. I was incredulous. "You seriously intend to attend the graduation?" "Yeah, George can't make it, and Emily asked me," he replied casually. "That's absurd, no matter how you spin it," I retorted, baffled by his decision. When I involuntarily raised my voice in disbelief, John's expression soured instantly. While I knew he occasionally picked Emma up from kindergarten, and I had done so myself when requested, it seemed nonsensical for a mere childhood friend, who wasn't even a biological parent, to attend a graduation ceremony. "Are you still skeptical of Emily and me? I'm disappointed that you're not even able to assist me," John shot back, clearly dissatisfied. He interrupted, saying, "Anyway, I'm attending the graduation tomorrow, so iron a shirt properly," before retreating to the bedroom. Having nowhere else to go, I called Emily. "Hello, Emily, about tomorrow. I apologize for tomorrow. I know I'm borrowing John, but Sarah, won't George be disappointed that you didn't show up for graduation?" Emily cut him off. "What topic are you discussing?" "Of course, I haven't informed George that tomorrow is the graduation. After the ceremony, I'll let him know," Emily retorted in jest. The fact that George didn't know about the graduation timetable surprised me. Subsequent investigation showed that John had been acting as a father figure at the kindergarten and that Emily hadn't told George about any of the activities. I felt dizzy from the situation's selfishness. "Emily, wait a moment, that seems really irrational, doesn't it? Not only is it rude to George, but it's also because he was a boyhood friend," I began, an angry tremble in my voice. "Sarah, what's wrong? You frighten me." Emily hung up the phone suddenly, saying, "Well, see you tomorrow." I was frustrated, but I nevertheless made a shirt, pressed a tie, and got John ready for Emma's graduation ceremony the following morning. John and Emily started going on dates more often after that, starting from once a month to once a week and then 3 times a week. George appeared to be suspicious as well. One evening, George came to our house by himself when John and Emily were out. "I'm sorry for visiting you late at night, but there's something that's been bothering me," George said. He showed me the GPS history he had put in Emily's car and asked, his countenance disturbed. Is it about the two of them? According to the GPS records, Emily had been going to the same hotel 3 times a week on the days she went out with John. Taking one look at George's expression, I realized what that meant. What do you want to do, George? I asked. I want to take revenge on those two, he replied, his tone resolute. Me too. I can't forgive them for betraying us after all this time. I concurred. We began planning our revenge in secret. I focused on increasing my income by taking on more work, while George transitioned to working from home. When John and Emily went out, George would bring Emma to my house, and we would care for her together. Unbeknownst to John and Emily, we gathered solid evidence of their affair. Once we had collected enough evidence and were ready to exact our revenge, we uncovered a shocking truth about Emma. Despite our desire for revenge, we hesitated to act, not wanting to harm the innocent girl. We decided to wait until she was an adult before proceeding. However, our plans were disrupted when I fell seriously ill and required long-term hospitalization. Even though I could work from my hospital room, my workload would inevitably decrease. John's reaction to my illness was indifferent, visiting me infrequently and showing no concern for my condition when I battled my illness. Emma's behavior began to change after her 15th birthday. She grew distant, and despite our inquiries, she remained evasive. Eventually, we learned from John himself the reason behind Emma's sudden shift in demeanor. It's been a while, John said, striding into the room with a flashy appearance. Yeah, it has, I replied, surprised by his unannounced visit. Without preamble, John thrust a divorce lawyer's business card at me, his grin stretching from ear to ear. Divorcing a wife who doesn't work. Pay me $1,000 a month as alimony, that's the deal, so take care, he declared, Emily by his side, wearing a matching expression of smug satisfaction. Casually agreed, I responded, surprising John momentarily with my nonchalant acceptance. As John exchanged smiles with Emily, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that he wasn't one to ponder too deeply. It was precisely this trait that made my plan so effective. With the notification of the finalized divorce from John, I wasted no time in initiating my revenge. Viewing it as a celebration of my recovery, I vowed to make them both shed tears. I moved quickly to get George and Emma transferred to a different hospital. I then told my lawyer that they would be in charge of all correspondence with John on my behalf. George, meantime, moved close to my new hospital and started coming to see me a lot, often accompanied by Emma. Emma's face remained serious, but her visits cheered me up every day. I'd already moved most of my stuff into the hospital room and given John the go-ahead to get rid of the remainder. I didn't want to bring anything from their touch into my new existence. After George and Emma moved in and the hospital transfer was completed, John bombarded me with missed calls. I answered the phone in frustration, only to hear John's frightened voice above the ranting of Emily and the sound of a distressed real estate agent. John insisted on knowing the reason we had to vacate the property. What are you saying? What's happening? Obviously, the house is at issue. Why must we vacate the property? John yelled, averting responsibility. Obviously, because that's my house, I said coolly, although I was secretly impressed by John's total lack of memory. The truth is that when I initially started freelancing, I rented a room in the house where we currently resided. During that period, my income wasn't sufficient to maintain 2 households, and John faced similar financial constraints, unable to afford living alone. Consequently, he moved into my place, where he never contributed to rent or utility bills for his room. Though he provided some funds for living expenses, they fell short of covering the place's upkeep, unfortunately. Due to its distance from the hospital where I was transferred, I had to cancel the room reservation. The day after filing for divorce, I initiated the cancellation process without informing John, as advised by the real estate agent who was aware of the situation. In the meantime, our house was sold, and George and Emma disappeared without warning. I proposed that we temporarily stay in a business hotel because I was worried about our new living arrangement. As soon as I started working with the speaker, John became irate and insisted on knowing when I would send the money because we were running low. A heated debate resulted from his insistence on a $1,000 payment that had not yet been established. I said nothing in response to his accusations, which made John yell incoherently into the phone. I wondered how John was going to handle his money for the next month, even with $1,000 left. After realizing that he expected money from me, trying not to lose my cool, I told John that we were pretty much strangers now, and asked that we not communicate again, which led him to bring up hiring a lawyer. I hung up on him before he could say anything, dismissing his threats. He kept trying to get through to me, but I didn't answer, so he didn't return my lawyer's calls either. It was clear that John was naive and unaware of the trouble he was causing other people. I let out a heavy sigh as I considered his self-centered actions and realized how immature he truly was. A few months later, following the hospital's temporary discharge, John and Emily stood in front of me, looking little and nervous. "It's a low blow to tell my parents," John said, glaring at me. I replied coolly, explaining that I had just told them of our divorce, but John's rebellion was soon dashed by his father's hard look. Remarkably, I had always enjoyed a positive relationship with my in-laws, often visiting and sharing meals with them even in John's absence, feeling a sense of responsibility to share the details of our divorce. I paid a visit to John's parents. When the conversation unfolded, John confronted me, questioning whether it was true that I was remarrying Emily. Confirming his suspicion, I explained that Emily, Emma, and I were planning to rebuild our lives as a family. However, John dismissed this notion, asserting that my only family was Sarah. His words caused his father to frown, indicating disbelief at John's attitude. John then handed me a bill from a luxury hotel where we had stayed. Perplexed, I questioned the significance of the bill, to which John responded as if it were self-evident, before collapsing suddenly. His mother, struggling for words, expressed her dismay, while Emily wore a similar expression of disbelief. Attempting to diffuse the tension, I mentioned the impending addition of a grandchild to the family. However, it was evident that my in-laws were not pleased with the situation, despite their understanding and acceptance of my decision not to have children. There remained a clear boundary between being a daughter-in-law and a friend. I recalled Emily's past grievances about this boundary, making me certain that my mother-in-law would not be pleased with the news. Emily's lack of remorse and apparent inability to grasp the situation sent shivers down my spine. Just then, someone who had been silent until now spoke up. It was Emma, who addressed Emily directly, stating that her father was the only one she considered her true father. Regardless of blood relation, she recounted how her father had always been left out of important events, a fact she had learned from him directly. The room fell into stunned silence when Emma's words sank in. It was a moment of realization, highlighting the strained dynamics within the family and the impact of their actions on each other. "Dad always said I was his daughter, so I am his daughter, and I will never be yours," Emma declared firmly, glaring at Emily. She then moved to sit beside me, adopting a more compassionate tone. "When I found out about this, I thought you would hate me, but Dad said that wasn't the case, so I came here today because, Emma, I love you so much. You were so kind to visit me every day while I was in the hospital. I was really happy." Sarah, Emma's words seemed to lift a weight off her shoulders, and she hugged me tightly, tears welling up in her eyes. Despite the circumstances of her parentage, she had been a child I had cared for deeply for 15 years. And there was no denying the bond we shared. Speaking of which, I couldn't help but wonder if Emily had ever questioned why I wasn't surprised when I found out Emma was John's daughter. Before Emily could respond, a new figure entered the room, George. Emily's panic was palpable, understandably so, given her recent demand for a divorce. Emily's shock was evident when George revealed that the divorce papers were still pending, and the 100-day waiting period for women to remarry hadn't been completed. It dawned on me that Emily was still legally my wife, and Emma, my daughter, but since there wouldn't be a wife anymore, I was taken aback. However, John's unexpected laughter cut through the tension when he assumed that Emily and I were together, but his assumptions about George's salary and my income were way off the mark, causing him to reel in shock when I revealed my annual income of $500,000. John's wide-eyed shock was a stark contrast to his earlier arrogance, highlighting the importance of understanding the full picture before making assumptions. I told Emily the truth about my 10-year successful career as a children's book author, and she stood there in astonished silence. Through essays, interviews, and upcoming film adaptations of my work, my revenue had increased. I showed my bank account screen with the large monthly deposits to bolster my argument. Emily was unable to argue against the evidence in front of her and was left stunned. As Sarah, let's make up, Emily stumbled out of trying to pull the conversation together. Nevertheless, she became enraged and yelled at John for his incredulity. I said coolly, unfazed by the commotion surrounding me, "Well, if you want to get married, feel free, and I will accept the damages payment without a doubt." I took Emma's hand and said goodbye to my in-laws, ignoring John's objections as I departed from their home. John was fired after it was discovered that he had been lying about his employment at my father-in-law's company. He made several attempts to contact me, but each time I told my father-in-law, we came to an end to our correspondence. Meanwhile, Emily lost custody to George and went through with the divorce, left to fend for herself. Disowned by her family, she struggled to make ends meet in a rundown apartment. Despite her hardships, Emma remained focused on her studies, aiming to study abroad and fulfill her dream of translating my picture books for children worldwide. As for me, my career continued to thrive, with increasing offers for anime adaptations and merchandise. Though my illness persisted, there was hope on the horizon, with the possibility of leaving the hospital next year. George and Emma's daily visits brought me comfort, and George's recent confession of love left me contemplating a future together. When I worked on my picture books each day, weaving stories of hope and happiness, I couldn't help but feel optimistic about what lay ahead for us. Today, once again, I embarked on the journey of crafting tales that would inspire and uplift readers around the world. That's all about the first story, and now let's watch another similar story. At the conclusion of the call, I extended a casual invitation, "Hey, feel free to swing by," but to my surprise, the video call lingered on, incomplete. Attempting to disconnect, I noticed my husband engaging in an animated conversation with someone else. His relaxed demeanor struck me as unusual, prompting a moment of curiosity. Peeking over my shoulder, my in-laws and I were taken aback by an unexpected turn in my husband's behavior. Let me introduce myself. I'm Katherine Johnson, a 36-year-old homemaker. Currently, I reside with my in-laws and our 3 children. With my husband's overseas assignment looming for the next 3 years, I wrestled with the daunting prospect of single-handedly raising our kids. Concerns about potential illnesses or accidents weighed heavily on my mind. After deliberation with my husband, we made the decision to move in with my in-laws for support. Bob and I started dating in high school and became friends in college, but our journey together started much earlier. Soon after graduating from college, we got married and excitedly started our journey of creating a life together. Bob's rapid career advancement in a prominent corporation propelled us into marriage happiness well ahead of schedule. Our parents fostered a familial closeness that had grown even before our wedding day. Beaming with pride at our union, in addition to my parents, I have an older brother who lives far away on my side of the family. He and Bob have a brotherly closeness that is similar to that of genuine siblings. Even though they live apart, their enduring connection was sparked by their mutual love in athletics during their school days, which is where their companionship began. They still find comfort in supporting their respective teams together. My husband Bob was ecstatic when our children were born, showing them tremendous love and care through gifts every single day. He was a really loving brother, but shortly after the birth of our first kid, our parents met a terrible accident that devastated our life. My final memory of them is of their joyful expressions, their hearts full of optimism for the future, and their enthusiastic anticipation of their grandchild's growing. Their abrupt disappearance had me in shock. I was in shock, getting ready for their burial with my older brother. It seems as though a mist of doubt has shrouded the memories of that time. I was overcome with an overwhelming sense of grief during the funeral, tears streaming down my face when I tried to accept the fact that they were not here. In the middle of his own sorrow, my brother also did his best to comfort me, but I felt as though I was just living and had no connection to the outside world. My spouse Bob turned into my steadfast source of support throughout those difficult times. He supported me, giving me comfort and strength when I needed it most, even though he was juggling his own grief with the responsibilities of his job. I came to the realization that I couldn't hold on to my hopelessness indefinitely. After seeing his fortitude in the face of hardship, with Bob's kind support, I gradually emerged from the darkness of grief and gained the strength to go on. When I expressed my remorse for burdening him with my sorrow, Bob simply laughed, his love unwavering. "Couples are meant to support each other through thick and thin," he reassured me. "It's only Natural for me to be here for you, Catherine, we're a team, and we'll weather this storm together. Inspired by his unwavering optimism, I resolved to honor his faith in me by striving to be the best partner and parent I could be even amidst my own pain. My in-laws extended their boundless love and support, treating me as their own daughter and urging me not to hesitate in leaning on them for assistance. Their unwavering presence reassured me that, together, we could navigate the challenges that lay ahead. Imbuing me with a newfound sense of confidence and security, we made the decision to cancel our apartment contract and complete the necessary paperwork to transfer our child's preschool, all in preparation for moving into my in-laws' home. Our children had formed strong bonds with their grandparents, so the transition to a new preschool was seamless, when they eagerly embraced the idea of living under the same roof. The house, a two-story property built by Bob in his younger days, was meticulously designed with child-friendliness and future accessibility in mind. Its spacious layout provided ample room for a growing family, and the kids were particularly fascinated by the stairs initially, turning them into their own playground. My initial anxieties about how the change in surroundings could affect them were dispelled when I saw how quickly they adjusted to the new setting and how full of energy they were. They quickly found new friends after acclimating to the new preschool setting, allaying any fears I had about possible schedule disruptions. Their strong health following the relocation gave me even more confidence that they were prospering in their new environment. Alongside my in-laws, I settled into a smooth rhythm of mutual support as we both adjusted to life in New York. As a stay-at-home mother, I had initially planned to do every household job, so I was pleasantly pleased when my in-laws proposed that we split the workload. My mother-in-law did the laundry while I was in charge of dinner prep, and we sometimes switched positions to complement one another's abilities. In addition to reducing my workload, this team effort gave me more time to spend with my kids, which helped me better understand their changing needs and subtleties. The kids yearning for their playtime with Bob was the lone small hitch, if that's even a word. They loved him, and they missed him terribly when he had a hectic work schedule. Bob was always willing to help, even with his busy work. He would often encourage me to take breaks and offer to help with tasks. I was worried about him because of his constant obligations, so I would sometimes ask how he was sleeping, and he would always tell me that he was fine, even during his absence due to employment abroad. Bob's kind, family-oriented demeanor and unwavering joy remained to be a source of support and comfort for us. Navigating Bob's overseas assignments over the past 3 years hasn't been without its challenges, with his return to the States occurring only once within that time frame. The anticipation of our video calls with him has become a cherished routine for both the kids and me. Despite the daunting 14-hour time difference, we make every effort to synchronize our schedules for these calls, aiming for at least one session per month, while emails serve as a means of regular communication. There's an incomparable joy in seeing each other's faces and hearing firsthand about Bob's adventures abroad. We were becoming excited in our house as our scheduled video call at 9 o'clock in the evening drew near. The children were so excited to interact with their father that they even napped ahead of time to make sure they were awake. They had set up the computer and were waiting impatiently for Bob to appear on the screen. When his face appeared, they burst into cheery greetings. Their heated conversation, interspersed with passionate hand gestures, conveyed a clear image of their desire to get back to him, even though I had my own list of things I wanted to talk to Bob about. I decided to postpone them until after the kids went to bed. My in-laws and I grinned broadly as we saw the interaction between Bob and the kids, appreciating the strong sense of family that was evident. Even though Bob mentioned his upcoming work obligations, it appeared that he had a limited window of approximately 2 hours to spare, which gave rise to a ray of optimism for some much-needed one-on-one time with him. But as they talked more, it was clear that the children were getting tired. Even though they had taken a sleep earlier, their exuberance began to fade, and signs of fatigue appeared, indicating that it was almost time for their usual bedtime. They were clearly tired, but they continued talking, trying to stay awake. The youngest fell asleep at intervals, waking for a short while before falling back asleep again. Seeing how exhausted they were, Bob suggested they go to bed, looking drowsy. It's only a month away till Dad returns to New York. It's about the conclusion of his abroad assignment, so we'll catch up then, he said. The kids still had a lot to say, even though they were excited for him to come back. Remember, you've got school and preschool tomorrow. Let's call it a night, I added, echoing Bob's suggestion. With the encouragement of my in-laws, we persuaded the kids to head to bed, bidding them good night as they reluctantly obeyed. When I escorted them to their rooms, My in-laws kindly offered to look after them, allowing Bob and me some time alone. Appreciative of their offer, I settled in for a chat with Bob, marveling at how the children had grown in just a month. Our conversation ranged from their milestones to our shared concerns and future plans. Bob's enthusiasm for our family never wavered, evident in his joy over the kids' achievements. His dedication to staying connected, despite the distance, reminded me of how lucky I was to have him as a partner. As the night progressed, my in-laws re-entered the conversation, seamlessly joining our discussion. Before we knew it, midnight had arrived, signaling the need to end the call. "Good night, take care, you've got work, remember," I reminded Bob, intending to bid farewell. However, in my grogginess, I only managed to disconnect my camera, leaving the call still active. Amidst my confusion, I inadvertently signaled the end of the call, prompting Bob to begin another conversation elsewhere. He had mentioned preparing for work earlier, but now he was extending an invitation to someone else, his tone unusually friendly, sending a wave of unease through me. There was a warmth in his voice, a sweetness that seemed oddly intimate, akin to how one might speak to a lover. Conflicted by his sudden change in demeanor, I hesitated to end the call, sensing something amiss. Noticing my discomfort, my in-laws inquired, intrigued by the shift in conversation. I confessed my unease, explaining that I had expected him to be getting ready for work, not inviting someone over. Although I felt guilty for eavesdropping on my husband, my mother-in-law shared my concern, and we decided to watch together. Despite my attempts to rationalize his behavior as perhaps mere friendliness towards a coworker, my apprehension grew as a foreign woman entered the frame, engaging with Bob in a manner that transcended cultural norms. The disbelief on my in-laws' faces mirrored my own shock, confirming that this was no innocent interaction. As the scene unfolded, revealing the betrayal before my eyes, I was surprisingly composed, my anger momentarily overshadowed by the need for evidence. With a steady hand, I pressed the record button, capturing the damning proof of infidelity. My in-laws' expressions shifted from guilt towards me to anger directed at Bob, their concern for my well-being evident when they offered me an out from the distressing sight. Despite my trembling, their care provided a semblance of solace as I resolved to witness the truth unfold. Though consumed by disgust and anger at being deceived, I remained surprisingly calm as the conversation between the two unfolded. It became increasingly apparent that the woman Bob was conversing with was aware of his marital status, hinting at a relationship confined to his time abroad. "Thanks for taking me on that trip the other time," she expressed, to which Bob responded nonchalantly, "No problem, thanks to your guidance. I had a great time." It dawned on me that Bob had recently taken this woman on a trip to a destination our kids had expressed interest in, a place we had discussed visiting as a family someday. Since they had no acquaintances abroad, they seemed to have indulged in their trip without any inhibitions. However, the woman's worried inquiries about expenses and the nervousness in her tone hinted at her fear of their affair being discovered. Unbelievably, Bob had been misleading me about his earnings, confessing to earning less than he did while secretly splurging on leisure activities. His deceitfulness regarding finances, coupled with the revelation of his recent escapades, cast a shadow of suspicion over all his past actions. My trust in Bob crumbled audibly when I processed the shocking truth, the clock ticking past 2 a.m., leaving us all stunned into silence. "We should get some sleep for now and then think about what's next," my father-in-law muttered, breaking the heavy silence as we dispersed to our bedrooms. But sleep eluded me. My mind raced with memories of the caring, proactive, and kind Bob I thought I knew. We had been acquainted since high school, and I had believed I understood him well. However, recent events shattered that perception, leaving me feeling estranged from the person I thought I knew. The fact that I was able to watch the scenario directly through a video chat threw me into a state of shock. Despite the fact that eyewitness stories or photographs alone might not have been enough to convince me of his adultery, attempting to come to terms with the betrayal caused me to experience a wave of emotions, including uncontrollable weeping. In spite of my efforts to fall asleep, I was preoccupied with Bob's thoughts, and the tiredness that I had been experiencing vanished as soon as the sun rose out of the sky. The following morning, after a night in which I was unable to sleep, I made an effort to disguise the redness that was around my eyes by applying makeup as I was preparing breakfast for my children. "Good morning to you. The breakfast is ready," I shouted out with a positive attitude, attempting to keep a sense of normalcy in my life. On the other hand, my children recognized the signs of exhaustion almost instantly. "Are you feeling okay, Mom?" they queried me with concern. "Your eyes are red," which prompted me to comfort them with a grin. "It's not a problem, honey. I simply stayed up late the night before. So it's possible that I'm a little bit weary in spite of my efforts to minimize the gravity of the issue." My children argued that I required adequate rest, and I responded to their concern in a humorous fashion. I made the decision to take a break after saying goodbye to them, and I fell asleep nearly immediately owing to the weariness I was experiencing. I had a strong desire in my mind to believe that the events that had occurred the night before were nothing more than a nightmare, and as I began to fall off to sleep, my consciousness began to melt away, in spite of the fact that my mother-in-law was in charge of preparing dinner and my father-in-law was responsible for collecting up the children from kindergarten. What was supposed to be a short siesta turned into a whole day of sleep. Immediately after waking up, I felt forced to apologize profusely for sleeping for such a lengthy period of time, and I immediately began assisting my mother-in-law as if nothing had occurred. After the sun had set and the children had gone to bed, I went to my in-laws and told them about my thoughts for the future regarding my decision to file a divorce. I admitted I don't think I can continue living with Bob. As an explanation for my decision, my husband's parents communicated their regret for their son's behavior and gave their support for the upcoming divorce proceedings, despite the fact that they were first stunned by the situation, due to the fact that Bob's return from his trip overseas is just a month away. I made the decision to quickly be ready for what was going to happen. The next day, I did not spend any time in seeking legal guidance from a lawyer who had prior expertise dealing with issues involving divorce and divorce-related adultery. While all was going on, I couldn't help but observe Bob's active presence on social media. He was posting photographs of his life overseas, and it seemed as though he was completely unaware of the chaos that he had caused back home. I realized that I needed to behave with caution in order to successfully navigate the impending divorce, despite the fact that he appeared to be unconcerned about it. My suspicions grew stronger as I proceeded farther into Bob's social media accounts in the hope of discovering information on his unknown girlfriend. After some time, I was able to identify the woman with whom he was associated, and I made the decision to take significant action. I sought to authenticate her identity by employing a private investigator, and the results of my investigation indicated that she was a local employee working for the same company as Bob. Having gathered all of this material, I went to Bob's employer and presented the issue to them, asking for their assistance through negotiations. Given Bob's reputation as a straightforward individual, they were initially skeptical and reluctant to trust the allegations. Nevertheless, after being shown the video proof, they showed that they were aware of the seriousness of the situation and promised their assistance. I confided in my brother and close friends, and I shared the painful reality with them. In addition to requesting support from Bob's company, I also sought assistance from this company. Their initial reaction was one of incredulity. Nevertheless, after confronting the proof with their own eyes, their disbelief transformed into wrath. Even my brother, who had a strong relationship with Bob, was incensed by his betrayal. He was devastated by his actions. Even though there was only a small amount of time left until Bob was supposed to return, the fact that I was a homemaker gave me the flexibility to get ready for the divorce that was about to take place. We were able to navigate the legal procedure effectively and ensured that everything was in place before Bob's arrival because to the unwavering support of my in-laws and the division of tasks that we had established. Nevertheless, one of the most difficult problems consisted of explaining the situation to our children, who were looking forward to Bob's return with tremendous anticipation. I addressed the delicate assignment with sensitivity, softly imparting the facts about Bob's dishonest actions. Because I was aware of their commitment to him, I was able to soothe them, despite the fact that they were initially confused and saddened, by explaining that living with Bob was no longer an option because of his betrayal. "It's because your dad told us a very bad lie, and I just can't forgive him," I stated in a quiet voice, hoping that they would get the seriousness of the issue, despite the fact that it was challenging. I was aware that it was necessary for us to be truthful with children as we navigated this volatile phase of our life. Having to cohabit with him became an impossible situation, due to the fact that Bob had been absent on work assignments overseas on a regular basis. His absence had become nearly ordinary in the beginning. His extended stays were sanctioned as a necessary component of the job. Nevertheless, as time progressed, it became abundantly evident that it was no longer possible to coexist peacefully with Bob. After all, I made arrangements for Bob's return celebration, inviting him to a private dining room at a restaurant. After I had finished making the required arrangements, it came as a surprise to him that the gathering was not limited to only his family. It also included executives from the corporation as well as a lawyer. My siblings were in the care of my brother, who had his own personal grudges against Bob and wished to avoid confrontation. My brother was responsible for my children. Bob's expression was one of bewilderment as he questioned the meeting that had not been anticipated. A brief outline of the claims of infidelity and the imminent divorce was provided by the attorney without any delay. Despite the evidence that was shown to him, Bob angrily denied any misconduct and dismissed it as nothing more than misunderstandings. His explanations appeared to be scripted, which caused shivers to run down my spine. Bob continued to insist that he was innocent, despite the fact that there was video proof and testimony, but his pleadings were ignored. His employers took immediate action to terminate his employment since they had misgivings about his behavior. In the process of confronting him, my in-laws became enraged. They emphasized the significance of maintaining family trust, which Bob appeared to disdain on the whole. Bob's perseverance in attempting to save the relationship was met with a lack of response. When I informed him that we would be having conversations regarding divorce in the future, I did it in a composed manner. However, I made it abundantly obvious that our interactions would be limited from that point forward. That evening, Bob made an effort to get in touch with me, but I had already made preparations to move with my children, thereby cutting all links with the past. The fact that I had to relocate the children and reorganize their schools and daycare facilities caused me to struggle with feelings of guilt. My concerns were alleviated, however, by their tenacity. In response to Bob's inquiry concerning our new location, my in-laws forcefully responded by shutting him down and expressing their disapproval of the situation. I ignored his reasons and continued to concentrate solely on the divorce process, despite the fact that he made numerous attempts to get in touch with me. The news that Bob had been seen in the vicinity of the school and kindergarten made me feel uneasy. But the fact that we had relocated to a more remote place gave me a sense of relief. The fact that Bob was well prepared and had legal representation throughout the mediation for the divorce made the process go more smoothly. I made sure that we had a fair portion of our assets and that we had full custody of our children, as well as an agreement about child support. Bob's last-ditch efforts to save our marriage were unsuccessful and were met with silence, despite the fact that he insisted on making regular visits with the children. I continued to be cautious. It was impossible for me to disregard the violation of trust, despite the fact that I acknowledged his parental rights. Therefore, my brother or my in-laws were responsible for supervising the visits, which ensured that the children's emotional well-being was protected. Following the collapse of his marriage, Bob sought the assistance of his friends, portraying himself as the victim. Their refusal to mediate, on the other hand, which was influenced by my earlier explanation, prevented any further issues from occurring. However, if I had not offered background, their compassion could have made the tragedy more difficult to bear. After informing those who were close to me about Bob's behavior, I experienced a sense of comfort. Despite the fact that Bob was once considered to be a nice and diligent individual, he has no allies as a result of his lying and infidelity. When Bob's friends and even my in-laws stopped supporting him, he found himself in an increasingly isolated position. Not only did he work full-time, but he also had many part-time jobs in a variety of fields. This was because his resources were running out, and he was also responsible for paying child support. Initially, Bob was eager to build a connection with the children. However, as the children became more aware of his wrongdoings, Bob's visits to them reduced. Regarding his mistress, who was allegedly located overseas, there were allegations that she was exposed to consequences from her position. Most likely as a lesson about having affairs with married men, these allegations occurred in relation to his mistress. Following the divorce, the contents of the marriage were divided amicably, and child support was established. In order to ensure that my children would have a future, I went back to work with the assistance of my brother. Through all of the challenges that come with being a single parent, I was able to successfully raise my children because I now live in a peaceful area. Outside of the city, I am able to spend a significant amount of time at home thanks to the fact that I work remotely. As my children have grown up and I have the opportunity to spend time with my grandchildren on occasion, I have found that I am able to appreciate the fundamental pleasures of gardening and relaxing when I prepare to enjoy this newly discovered tranquility. I am looking forward to retiring to a quiet retirement and treating my loved ones with dinners that I have prepared here at home. Above is today's story. If you like it, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up. See you next time.